What's up, YouTube? What's going on? It's been a little while. It's nearly been a week, actually, since I last uploaded a video. So, you know, I said I'd do one weekly, so I thought maybe I should do at least one. So, I looked at that Google guy who got fired for saying some reasonable things. I read the 10-page document that he put out. I read the memo, the infamous memo. Yeah, I just finished reading that just now, and I don't know. There's a few things that have really annoyed me about this situation. Now, I don't mind that he was fired, although I think that was probably a bit over the top. But that's kind of neither here nor there for me. You know, the company can kind of do what they want on that. But honestly, though, like, there's a lot of basically, the way the media is spinning this is that it's an anti-diversity document that he was trying to push or whatever. And like after reading it, that's like so far from the truth. It's just ridiculous. And it's just a lot of what the document is talking about is basically just saying that we need to accept some broader truths of reality about men and women, and why that there may be other forces at play that are not like active oppression. Like, so for instance, like the reason why there's not, you know, shit tons of women in STEM fields is not because people in STEM fields are stopping women from entering the fields. It's more of a case that women aren't choosing to go there. So it's you know, it's that kind of that's the kind of tone of it, is that kind of thing. And generally I agree with that. I mean, like a lot of it he really was overemphasizing that he's for diversity and all this stuff. He just said we just shouldn't be trying to force it to happen, basically. And that's what he was trying to say to Google and people who work there and whatever. And then the woman who is part of the department for diversity in Google then came back with her own statement, and on it she was like, in the email, like one of the first things she says in it is, I'm not going to link to the memo because, you know, it's not a viewpoint that we condone or whatever. Like, that's her kind of like condescending. We're not going to link to this. Actually, we're not going to help spread any more of the fire. We're not going to spread any more of this logic. But the thing, it's kind of telling that they would kind of do that, though, because the rest of the email, the way it goes on, the way that she talks about it, is like, Google is for diversity, and that's that. That is that. There's no, you know, can't question that that ideal, and we're going to be doing that, and we're going to fucking ram it down your throat like, oh yeah, we're going to get that right in there, yeah. Oh. That's what she's kind of saying, and it's just kind of weird because the way that she's putting it across is just so. It's just obvious that she didn't even read the thing. It's just obvious she didn't even read the memo properly. She just probably assumed it was just anti-diversity because she was told that it was, and probably gave it a quick scan and didn't even read it properly. Because I read it properly, and I didn't come out with that opinion. And this is some. I mean, either that or something else is going on. Either they didn't read it right, or something else is going on. And that's what I wanted to kind of talk about mainly in this issue, is that I think this whole situation speaks to something else that's going on. Now, there's a lot of big industries at the moment, like Google, the BBC, Marvel, that are all, I mean, I don't know about the BBC, essentially, but they're kind of SJW. Like, the BBC have, like, job positions that are only for minority people, like gays, blacks, whatever. So if you're a straight white male, you can't apply to the job. Like, literally, like, no straight whites need apply, please. Yeah, so, like, they're kind of SJ. They fall in a similar bracket. Now, they these kinds of places like Marvel as well. If you don't know, go to Diversity in Comics or maybe Aiden Paladin. They both talk about different things that are going on in the comics world. I have a passing interest in. I say a passing interest, but I'm a geek basically. But I've been watching a lot of videos from Diversity in Comics, and he talks a lot about how Marvel has become over the years, and it's really quite interesting actually. I wasn't really quite aware of it because I don't keep up with modern comics. I just read a lot of different superheroes that I like rather than keeping up with various issues as they go along. But yeah, you got Marvel, BBC, Google. What do all these three places have in common? Aside from Marvel, but I'll get to Marvel in a second. What do the BBC and Google have in common? They're both being investigated for wage gaps and paying women less. Now, after all the talk of we need to get... there was that other company as well that was investigating the wage gap. They got investigated, and it turned out they had wage gaps. And it's just... like, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about, why something else going on. Like, is there actually a bit of... When SJWs focus on these injustices that are going on, is that a projection? It really is. What they're saying is, we're the ones given the injustice, and we just don't want you to think we are, so we're going to misdirect it and say that there's just this kind of grand injustice in the world that we need to fight. But so long as you're focused on this invisible threat, you won't recognise that it's actually us. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it kind of feels like. It feels a little bit like they're not, that Marvel are taking part in this in a slightly different way. They're employing people as editors or assistant editors, but paying them like, no, that's it. They're giving them different titles. So they're hiring them and they're working as editors, but they're called something else. I can't remember what they're called now, but they were called something else, like assistant to the manager or whatever it is. Not the assistant manager. If you get that American Office joke. But it's just... Sorry. Yeah, it seems a bit nefarious, doesn't it? All this kind of stuff. It feels a little bit sinister. Like, all these SJW kind of organisations that have very left-leaning ideals, always talking about diversity, always talking about feminism, always needing to empower people, always doing this stuff. But then when you get into the brass tacks of it and you actually look at what's going on, then they're actually not paying women right. If you look at how they discriminate for hiring jobs, it's all based on race. Whether you call it positive discrimination or not, they're still kind of doing that rather than merit-based hiring. And it's things like this that really make me wonder about the whole movement of the SJW thing, because I've known a lot of SJWs in my life, and I've known a lot of these kinds of people, and I'm not gonna lie, like a lot of the people that I know who are the strongest SJWs, the ones that are really the most vocal and the most visible, are all pretty much terrible human beings. When you get into the private life side of things, they're just like awful people. There's this one fella that I knew who potentially, like he was like such a big like socialist, like diversity person, like feminist. Like he is like anything that you can think of that would make him look like a good person. He was on it. Vegan. That's it. No, living a guilt-free life. Guilt-free life. No ethical consumption under capitalism, but I'm living a guilt-free life. That's how it is, son. That's what he was doing all day, right? And but I knew him personally, and behind closed doors, he told me a story about how this girl contacted him, saying that he potentially got this girl pregnant, And he just blocked her on Facebook and never even spoke to her again. Never pursued that. Never tried to find out if that was his kid or not. Never did anything about it. And to me, that is not indicative of someone who cares about people, cares about diversity or anything like that. That is like the opposite of that. Like, if somebody told me that, even if I didn't like this person, if somebody told me that I potentially got them pregnant, then I'd be getting tests, I'd be finding out if it was my child, I'd be taking care of that. So don't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a fucking man, you know what I mean? Like, I don't fuck about. Like, that is serious stuff. And you can't, and like, for me, like, that to me, like, him having that persona of, I'm such a good person, is a deflection so that we can talk all day about these concepts about feminism and stuff like that, so we're not actually talking about me. We're not actually talking about who I am and how I am as a person. And he was actually a pretty mean-spirited person a lot of the time. He wasn't really a good person, like, and he was really intolerant of other people who didn't have his views. Like, if I questioned something about feminism, oh shit, man, it was a shitstorm. Luckily, I don't speak to him anymore or anything like that. But this is what I'm getting at. Maybe there's a reflection there, like, because I'm seeing the same thing in these companies at the moment, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe there's some kind of correlation there. That people are latching onto these SJW titles, these platitudes, these notions, and actually they're using it as like a smoke screen. A bit like how people talk about religious zealots and stuff like that, about how they say, oh, you know, people like Trump and stuff like that, they're using religion as like a stepping stone to get what they want, and it's just to make themselves look like a good person, and blah, 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 and appeal to certain demographics. Well, why wouldn't these companies do the exact same thing and, you know, bring you in, make you think they're so good and amazing, but really they're kind of shitty, and they do fucked up shit behind closed doors. I mean, you know, it's something to really ponder about, I think. And yeah, I think we should all have a little bit more, like, you know, I think this SJW thing goes a little bit further than just, you know, protests and back and forth, you know, bollocks between the right and the left and whatever. There's more. I feel like there's more going on here that maybe we haven't tapped into. You know, there's already been talk about how it's infected universities and the diversity of thought rather than, you know, just skin color and stuff like that. And you know, that's pretty nefarious. That is a pretty nefarious thing to have that going on. You know, I wouldn't say we should just start laying off left wing professors or whatever it is, or teachers and stuff. But I also think that it is an odd turn of events, isn't it, to like have that happen, to have it so where they're consciously, you know, employing people of a certain political spectrum. That's concerning. Just as it'd be concerning that, you know, some company would only ever hire only straight white men, and that's it, nothing else. That would be concerning. You know, so it's a really odd situation that they've gotten themselves into, and I'm really happy that guy wrote that memo. You know, honestly, I think he was being pretty reasonable. I think he probably went about it the wrong way. He probably just should have sent that memo to the people involved with, like, you know, the higher up people, because in my understanding of the situation is that he's kind of just sent it to everyone. And that was probably not the best move, and that's probably the reason why he got fired. But at the same time, Google probably needed that shake-up, because there probably is people that work there that feel a bit stifled by the atmosphere, and, you know, and maybe they do notice things like people getting hired who are not necessarily good enough for the job, but they got hired because they're a certain skin colour. You know, things like that. You know, and it's not even bad that they've got a skin colour, it's just being good for the job. You know, like, no one would care about the skin colour if the job was being done correctly or even beyond that. But if it's being not done well, and the person also happens to not be of a certain skin colour, then what can you say about it? It seems obvious what's happened, isn't it? They've been hired purely on a racial basis rather than a merit basis, which, you know, I don't think any of us should really want. Really, I don't think any of us should want that. You know, I sometimes think, like, if I was hired just for my race and not for my ability, especially if it's something that I put a lot of time into, like if I was a coder or something like that, and I'd spent a lot of my education actually getting to this point, and you know what I mean, like if I was hired purely because I was just white, and they just kind of put me at the front so they could kind of show me off, I'd feel like that's pretty fucking racist in a lot of ways. I'd feel like used. I wouldn't feel valued. And I don't know, I just think that's something to kind of think about. Like, I don't know, I'm kind of ranting now, as I always do. Kind of ranting now at this point, but I don't know, just some things I noticed, some things I was thinking about after reading that document. I just, yeah, it just seems weird to me that a lot of these people that are just so vehemently against, vehemently for feminism, vehemently for all these things, are just almost always the opposite of what they say. You know, you've got someone like Anita Sarkeesian. You know, she's doing a panel about harassment to women online, but in real life, she harasses Sargon of Akkad verbally in real life to his face. And I'm just thinking, like, what's worse? And two, doesn't that completely undermine everything that you're doing right now? If you're on a panel about harassment and you start harassing somebody, that's just... But you think that's okay, and there should be no blowback for that. Honestly, there's some disconnect going on here, and I'm sure Jordan Peterson has something to say about this kind of shit. He probably already has. He's probably done multiple lectures about this kind of thing. I just haven't gone through his whole library of stuff. I've seen a bunch of stuff that I've been interested in, but I honestly can't say I've watched all of it, because there's a lot of content there. But yeah, some things to think about there. Give me a comment to tell me what you think about my hypothesis about the SJW mentality. You know, like the way that they project certain things, like they project injustice on the world, but really it's actually them that's creating the injustice in the world, and they just don't want people to focus on that. They want it to be blamed and shift the blame all over the place, so that we're not focusing on the real problem. Also, give me a like for my Bruce Lee t-shirt. Big respect to the man. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Keep on trucking. Keep it live. Keep it rocking in the free world. Keep it rolling. Keep it rolling. Keep it rolling. Yeah.